She left me in Mexico, but I left her in the truth.
The cockroach crawling across my face at 6 in the morning was my first clue that Rachel's romantic surprise had gone sideways. I brushed the little fool off my cheek and sat up in what could generously be called a bed. If beds are made of concrete, wrapped in sandpaper, and soaked in the tears of disappointed tourists. The Hotel Paraíso in Puerto Vallarta looked nothing like the pictures Rachel had shown me. Those must have been from 1987, back when the place still had working plumbing and walls that weren't held together by prayer and duct tape. The note on the nightstand, written in Rachel's perfect lawyer handwriting, made everything crystal clear. Paul, surprise. Consider this payback for all those times you forgot our anniversary. Hope you enjoy your solo adventure in paradise. Don't worry, I'll keep the home fires burning. XOXO, your loving wife. My wallet was gone. My passport was missing. My phone had exactly 3% battery and no international plan. Rachel had played me like a fiddle, and I danced to every note. I stumbled to the cracked mirror hanging above a sink that looked like it had survived the Mexican Revolution. The face staring back at me was a mess. 3 days of stubble, bloodshot eyes, and the general appearance of a man who'd been run over by his own life. Paul Mackenzie, 38 years old, auto mechanic, ex-Marine, and apparently the world's biggest sucker. The last thing I remembered clearly was Rachel insisting I try those traditional Mexican drinks at the airport bar. Everything after that was a blur of tequila, mariachi music, and my wife's laughter echoing in my ears as she disappeared into the crowd. I found my phone charger and plugged it into the one working outlet in the room. While it slowly came back to life, I tried to piece together how I'd ended up in this particular slice of hell. Rachel had been planning this trip for months, insisting we needed quality time together, away from our hometown of Haven Mills, New York. She'd handled all the arrangements, booked the flights, even packed my bag for me. What a thoughtful wife. My phone finally had enough juice to turn on, and immediately started buzzing with notifications. 17 missed calls from my daughter Mia, 43 text messages, and enough social media alerts to crash a small server. The first text from Rachel, sent while I was presumably unconscious in this roach motel, made my blood pressure spike. Hope you're having fun, babe. Don't worry about me. I'm keeping myself very entertained back home. The accompanying photo showed Rachel at Luigi's, our favorite restaurant in Haven Mills, raising a champagne glass to the camera. She wasn't alone. Some guy in an expensive suit had his arm around her waist, and they were both laughing like they'd just heard the world's funniest joke. The timestamp showed it was taken 6 hours after our flight was supposed to land. I scrolled through the other messages, each one a fresh kick to the gut. Rachel had documented her entire joke on social media, posting updates about her hilarious prank on her husband. Her friends were eating it up, commenting with crying laughing emojis and praising her creativity. My own daughter had shared one of the posts with the caption, "Mom is savage." The next text from Mia was less enthusiastic. "Dad, please tell me you're okay. Mom says this is just a joke, but people are saying mean things online." I tried calling Rachel. Straight to voicemail. I tried calling Mia. Same thing. I tried calling my best friend Tommy from the auto shop. His phone was disconnected. That was weird, but I'd deal with it later. The hotel clerk, a weathered man who looked like he'd seen every possible variation of tourist misery, barely glanced up when I approached his desk. My Spanish was limited to ordering beer and asking for directions to the bathroom. But desperation is a universal language. "Excuse me, sir. I need help. My wife. She took my passport. My money." He held up a hand and sighed like I was the 15th abandoned husband he'd dealt with that week. Maybe I was. "American Embassy," he said in heavily accented English. 2 hours by bus. You pay for room first." Of course. Even in my personal disaster, there was a bill to pay. I emptied my pockets and found exactly $43 in crumpled bills and loose change. The room was $60 a night, and I'd apparently been here for 3 nights. The math was not in my favor. "I don't have enough money," I admitted. The clerk shrugged with the indifference of a man who'd heard every sob story ever invented. "You work. Kitchen needs help. Minimum wage, American dollars." And that's how Paul Mackenzie, former Marine and certified automotive technician, found himself washing dishes in a Mexican fleabag hotel while his wife partied it up back home with her mystery man. The kitchen was hotter than the surface of Mercury. The dishes were crusted with substances that defied identification, and my coworkers spoke exactly zero English. But it was honest work, and after 3 days of scraping together enough money for bus fare, I finally made it to the embassy. The embassy was a fortress of bureaucracy, wrapped in red tape and seasoned with pure frustration. After 6 hours of waiting, forms, more waiting, different forms, and a final wait that felt like geological time, I had a temporary passport and a lecture about responsible travel from a consular officer who looked young enough to be my daughter. The flight home was the longest 8 hours of my life. I had plenty of time to think, and none of my thoughts were particularly charitable toward my loving wife. Rachel had always been competitive. It's what made her a good lawyer. But this was something else entirely. This was calculated humiliation, designed to make me look like a fool in front of our entire town. Haven Mills, New York, population 23,000, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, usually before they knew it themselves. By the time I landed at Albany International, Rachel's prank had probably been dissected, analyzed, and judged by every coffee shop philosopher and barstool expert in town. The taxi ride home gave me my first real look at the damage. The driver, a guy named Steve who'd gone to high school with my brother, couldn't resist commenting. "Hey, aren't you the guy whose wife left him in Mexico? Dude, that's harsh. My wife just hides the TV remote when she's mad at me." Even the taxi drivers were talking about it. Perfect. Our house looked exactly the same from the outside. A modest, 2-story colonial on Maple Street that we'd bought 12 years ago when Mia was 4, and we still believed in happily ever after. The lawn needed mowing, the gutters needed cleaning, and the front porch light was burned out. Normal suburban neglect. Nothing that suggested domestic warfare. I paid Steve and walked up the driveway, noting that Rachel's BMW was gone, probably out celebrating her comedic genius with her new friend from the restaurant. The front door was locked, which was unusual. We never locked the door during the day in Haven Mills. I fumbled for my keys and let myself into my own house. The silence hit me first. Not the comfortable quiet of an empty home, but the oppressive silence of a place that had been deliberately emptied. Half the furniture was gone. The good TV, the one we'd bought for the living room last Christmas, had been replaced by the old one from the basement. Rachel's personal items, her books, her decorative pillows, her collection of wine glasses from every vacation we'd ever taken, had vanished. A manila envelope sat on the kitchen counter with my name written across it in Rachel's precise handwriting. Inside were divorce papers, already filled out and notarized, along with a note that made my hands shake with rage. Trump, I hope you enjoyed your little vacation. Consider it a going-away present. I've filed for divorce and moved in with Chad temporarily. Don't bother trying to contact me through my office. I've already explained to everyone how unstable you've become since losing your job. Mia will stay with me, of course. She's old enough to choose, and she's chosen the parent who doesn't abandon family responsibilities for selfish adventures. You can pick up your things this weekend when I'm not here. Try not to break anything on your way out. Rachel, lost my job? What the hell was she talking about? I've been working at Murphy's Auto for 15 years. Old Mike Murphy treated me like a son. There was no way. Murphy's name appeared on the screen. Paul? Jesus, where the hell have you been? I've been trying to reach you for a week. Mike, I'm sorry, I was in Mexico and trolley. Mexico? What are you talking about? Rachel said you'd had some kind of breakdown and disappeared. She came by the shop with some guy, said you'd been drinking heavily and making threats. Paul, I had to let you go. I'm sorry, but I can't have that kind of drama around the shop. Insurance won't cover it. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered on the kitchen floor. Rachel hadn't just left me in Mexico and filed for divorce. She'd systematically destroyed my life, piece by piece, while I was washing dishes 2,000 miles away. I picked up the phone. Mike was still talking, his voice tinny and distant. If you get some help, maybe we can work something out down the road, but right now, I interrupted. I never made any threats. I never had a breakdown. Rachel left me stranded in Mexico as a prank. She took my passport and my money. Silence on the other end. Then, Paul, that's not what she said. She had proof. Photos of you drinking, text messages. What kind of proof? Look, I don't want to get in the middle of this. You two need to work out your problems. But I can't take you back right now. I'm sorry. He hung up. I stared at the phone, trying to process what had just happened. Rachel hadn't just humiliated me. She'd engineered my complete social and professional destruction while I was trapped in a foreign country, unable to defend myself. The front door opened and Mia walked in, home from school. At 16, she was the perfect combination of Rachel's sharp intelligence and my stubborn streak, though right now she looked more like her mother, calculating and cold. "Oh," she said, stopping in the doorway. "You're back." "Hello to you too, sweetheart. Nice to see my daughter missed me." Her backpack and crossed her arms. "Mom said you might show up today. She wanted me to give you this." She handed me another envelope. "And she said to tell you that your little sufferer act isn't fooling anyone." "Mia, whatever your mother told you, she didn't have to tell me anything, Dad. I saw the videos. Everyone saw them. You were completely wasted at that bar in Mexico, picking fights with random people. Mom showed me the footage from the hotel security cameras." "What videos? What footage?" Mia pulled out her phone and showed me a grainy video that had been posted to Rachel's Facebook page. It showed a man who looked like me, stumbling drunk through what appeared to be a hotel lobby, shouting incoherently at no one in particular. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 days after Rachel had sedated me. "That's not me," I said. "Dad, come on. It's obviously you." I looked closer at the video. The man had my build, my hair color, even wore similar clothes. But something was off about his face, his posture. It looked like me, but it wasn't me. "Mia, I swear to you, that is not me in that video." She rolled her eyes with the exaggerated disdain that only teenagers can muster. "Whatever, Dad. Mom said you'd probably deny everything. She said people with drinking problems always lie about it." "I don't have a drinking problem. That's why you disappeared to Mexico without telling anyone and got so drunk you couldn't find your own hotel room for 3 days. The pieces were starting to come together, and the picture they formed made my stomach turn. Rachel hadn't just played a prank on me. She'd orchestrated an elaborate campaign to destroy my reputation, complete with fake evidence and character assassination. While I was trapped in Mexico, she'd been back home spinning a story about my supposed breakdown and disappearance. "Mia, listen to me very carefully. Your mother sedated me at the airport bar and left me stranded in Mexico. She took my passport and my wallet. That video is fake, or it's someone else who looks like me. I've been working in a hotel kitchen for a week just to earn enough money to get home." Mia stared at me for a long moment, and I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Then her phone buzzed with a text message, and the moment was gone. "Mom's picking me up in 10 minutes, she said. "She doesn't want me alone with you right now." "I'm your father, Mia. I would never hurt you." "Yeah, well, that's what all abusive dads say, isn't it?" Words hit me like a physical blow. Abusive? Rachel had convinced our own daughter that I was dangerous. "Has your mother told you I've been abusive?" "She didn't have to tell me, Dad. I have eyes. I've seen how you get when you're angry." "When ever seen me violent, Mia? When have I ever raised a hand to you or your mother?" She couldn't answer because it had never happened. She couldn't answer because it had never messaged. She couldn't answer because it had never seen. When have I ever seen me violent? She couldn't answer because it had never messaged. She couldn't answer because it had never messaged. When have I ever seen me violent? She couldn't answer because it had never messaged. She couldn't answer because it had never messaged. She couldn't answer because it had never messaged. When have I ever seen me violent? She couldn't answer because it had never messaged. When have I ever seen me violent? She couldn't answer because it had never messaged. When have I ever seen me violent? When have I ever seen me violent? She couldn't answer because it had never messaged. When have I ever seen me violent? When have I ever seen me violent? She couldn't answer because it had never messaged. 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 When have I ever seen me violent? She couldn't answer because it had never messaged. When have I ever seen me violent? When have I ever seen me violent? That it had never happened. I'd never so much as raised my voice to either of them, let alone been physically aggressive. But Rachel had planted the seed of doubt, and in the current climate, that was all it took. A car horn honked outside. Mia grabbed her backpack and headed for the door. Mia, wait, please. Just give me a chance to explain. She paused at the door and looked back at me with something that might have been pity. Dad, I really hope you get the help you need. But until you do, I can't be around you. It's not safe. She left, and I was alone in my half-empty house, with divorce papers and a growing understanding of just how thoroughly Rachel had destroyed my life. But she'd made one mistake in her carefully orchestrated plan. She'd underestimated how much a man can learn about revenge when he has nothing left to lose. The envelope Mia had given me contained more than just legal documents. Rachel had included a detailed accounting of our assets, helpfully highlighting how the division would work in her favor. The house would be sold, with her getting 60% because she'd contributed more to the down payment. My retirement account would be split 50-50, except for the portion I'd contributed before our marriage, which somehow didn't count. My tools, my truck, even my grandfather's watch, everything had been cataloged and assigned a value. But the real masterpiece was the character assassination portfolio she'd compiled. Photos of me drinking at various social events over the years, taken out of context and arranged to suggest a pattern of booze misuse. Screenshots of text messages I'd sent, edited to remove context and make innocent complaints sound threatening. Even my military service record had been twisted. My honorable discharge was reframed as evidence of anger management issues and difficulty with authority. Rachel had been planning this for months, maybe years. While I'd been working overtime to pay for Mia's college fund and our mortgage, my wife had been building a case against me with the methodical precision that had made her one of the most feared divorce attorneys in the county. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rachel specialized in destroying marriages for a living, and she'd decided to practice on her own. I spent the rest of the evening going through the house, taking inventory of what remained. She'd been strategic about what she'd taken. Nothing obviously valuable or sentimental, just enough to make the house feel empty and foreign. The family photos were gone, replaced by faded rectangles on the walls. My favorite coffee mug had been replaced by a chipped one from a gas station. Even the good toilet paper had been swapped out for the cheap stuff. It was psychological warfare, designed to make me feel like a stranger in my own home. My phone rang around 9 p.m. The caller ID showed Tommy Brennan, my best friend since high school and fellow mechanic at Murphy's Auto. I've been trying to reach him for days. Tommy, thank God, Paul. His voice was cold, formal. I heard you were back in town. Yeah, I just got back today. Listen, I need to talk to you about what happened at the shop. Mike said he had to let me go, but I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Silenced on the other end. Then, there's no misunderstanding, Paul. We all saw what you did. What I did? Tommy, I was in Mexico. Whatever Rachel told you, she didn't tell us anything, Paul. We saw it ourselves. The security footage from the shop. The threatening messages you sent to Mike's wife. The way you trashed the break room before you left. My head was spinning. What security footage? What messages? Tommy, Don't lie to me, Paul. I've known you for 20 years and I never thought you'd sink this low. Threatening an old man's wife because you got fired? That's not the guy I grew up with. I never threatened anyone. I was washing dishes in a Mexican hotel while all this was supposedly happening. Right. And I suppose the video of you keying Mike's truck in the parking lot was your evil twin. Another fake video. Rachel's campaign against me was even more extensive than I'd realized. Tommy, listen to me. Rachel sedated me and left me stranded in Mexico. While I was gone, she's been creating fake evidence to make it look like I had some kind of breakdown. I need you to believe me. I want to believe you, Paul. But the evidence. F the evidence. You've known me since we were 12 years old. When have I ever threatened a woman? When have I ever destroyed property? When have I ever done anything like what you're describing? Another long silence. When Tommy spoke again, his voice was softer, uncertain. The Paul I know wouldn't do those things. But people change, And the videos can be faked. Tommy, I'm begging you. Just give me a chance to prove that I'm being set up. I can't, Paul. Even if you're telling the truth, I can't be associated with this right now. My wife is pregnant, and I can't afford to lose my job over your problems. So you're just going to abandon me? 20 years of friendship, and you won't even hear me out. I'm sorry, Paul. I really am. But I have to think about my family. He hung up, and I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered, the screen going dark. Perfect. Now I didn't even have a working phone. I walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, looking for a beer. Rachel had cleaned it out, leaving nothing but condiments and a carton of milk that had expired while I was in Mexico. The freezer contained a single frozen dinner and a bottle of cheap vodka that must have been left behind by accident. I considered the vodka for a long moment. It would be easy to prove Rachel right, to become the drunk she'd painted me as. A few shots and the pain would fade, at least temporarily, but that's exactly what she wanted. She was counting on me to self-destruct, to validate her carefully constructed narrative. Instead, I put the bottle back and made myself a cup of coffee with the cheap instant stuff she'd left behind. If Rachel wanted a war, she'd get one. But I'd fight it, sober and smart. I spent the next 3 hours going through every document in the house, looking for anything that might help me understand the scope of Rachel's deception. In her home office, which she'd apparently forgotten to clean out completely, I found a folder labeled Mackenzie Case, hidden behind some old tax returns. Inside were printed emails between Rachel and someone named Chad Morrison, discussing strategy for neutralizing Paul's credibility and establishing a pattern of instability. The emails went back 6 months, long before our trip to Mexico. There were also contact sheets for a private investigator, receipts for video editing software, and most damning of all, a contract with an actor named Derek Silva, who bore a striking resemblance to me. Rachel hadn't just planned to leave me in Mexico. She'd hired someone to impersonate me, creating fake evidence of erratic behavior while I was trapped in a foreign country. The whole thing was a setup from the beginning. Chad Morrison. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I booted up Rachel's old laptop. She'd taken her good one, but left this ancient machine behind. It took forever to start up, but eventually I was able to access her browser history. Chad Morrison owned Morrison Development, one of the biggest construction companies in the region. He was also recently divorced, worth about $10 million, and according to his company website, committed to building stronger communities through innovative partnerships. Innovative partnerships. Like the one he'd apparently formed with my wife. The browser history told the whole story. Rachel had been researching Chad for months, learning about his business, his interests, his previous marriage. She'd even looked up his ex-wife's divorce settlement. Apparently, the woman had walked away with half of everything after proving infidelity. Rachel had found herself a rich, recently divorced Mark and decided to upgrade her life. The only problem was me, a blue-collar husband who might be entitled to half of her assets in a divorce. So she decided to eliminate that problem by destroying my credibility first. It was brilliant in a sociopathic way. By the time I got back from Mexico, I'd be seen as an unstable drunk who'd abandoned his family. No judge would award me anything significant, and Rachel would be free to start her new life with Chad's money. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd left evidence behind. I spent the rest of the night printing out everything I could find: emails, browser history, financial records showing payments to the private investigator and the actor. By morning, I had a stack of documents that painted a clear picture of Rachel's conspiracy. The question was what to do with it. I could take it to a lawyer, but that would require money I didn't have. I could go to the police, but what crime had actually been committed? Infidelity wasn't illegal, and neither was leaving your husband in Mexico, technically speaking. The fake videos were more problematic, but proving they were fake would require expensive forensic analysis. No, the legal system would take too long and cost too much. Rachel had used my friends and community against me, turning them into weapons in her war. It was time to return the favor. I walked to the corner store and bought a cheap prepaid phone, then spent the morning making calls. The first was to my old Marine buddy, Jake Sullivan, who now worked as a private investigator in Albany. Jake owed me a favor from way back. and he was one of the few people who might believe my story without extensive proof. "Paul Mackenzie, you son of a witch," Jake answered on the second ring. "I heard you went crazy and disappeared to Mexico." "What I'm calling about, Jake. I need help, and I need someone who won't believe everything they hear on the gossip circuit." "I'm listening." I gave him the abbreviated version, Rachel's setup, the fake videos, the systematic destruction of my reputation. Jake listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I'd always liked about him. "So you want me to investigate your wife?" Expressions, called, apparently. "And yeah, I want you to find out everything you can about her relationship with Chad Morrison. When it started, how they met, what they're planning. I also want you to track down this actor she hired and get him to admit what he did. That's going to cost money, Paul. Money you probably don't have right now. I'll find a way to pay you. I just need to know what I'm up against." Jake was quiet for a moment. "You know what? Forget the money for now. I never liked Rachel anyway. Always thought she was too good for her own good. Give me a week and I'll have everything you need to know." The second call was to my cousin Danny, who worked as a bartender at the Rusty Anchor, Haven Mill's premier dive bar and unofficial center of local gossip. If I was going to fight Rachel's propaganda campaign, I needed to understand exactly what story was being told around town. "Danny, it's Paul. I need a favor." "Jesus, Paul, where have you been? People are saying all kinds of crazy stuff about you." "That's what I want to talk about. Can you meet me somewhere private? I need to know what people are saying, and I need someone to hear my side of the story." "I don't know, man. Rachel came by the bar last week with some rich guy, and they were telling everyone about your breakdown. She seemed really upset." "I'm sure she did. Danny, you've known me your whole life. Do you really think I'd threaten an old man's wife or trash my own workplace?" "No, that doesn't sound like you. But the videos can be faked. Look, just meet me for coffee somewhere neutral. Give me 30 minutes to tell you what really happened. If you don't believe me after that, I'll leave you alone." "Okay, but not in town. Too many people know us. There's a diner on Route 9 just past the county line. I'll meet you there in an hour." The third call was the hardest one. I dialed Mia's number, knowing she probably wouldn't answer. I was right. It went straight to voicemail. "Mia, it's Dad. I know you don't want to talk to me right now, but I need you to know that everything your mother has told you is a lie. I was set up, and I can prove it. I love you more than anything in this world, and I would never do anything to hurt you or your mother, no matter how angry I might be. Please, just give me a chance to show you the truth. I'm not the man your mother is making me out to be, and deep down, you know that." I ended the call and stared at the cheap phone for a long moment. Mia was the only thing that really mattered in all of this. Rachel could take the house, the money, even my reputation, but she couldn't have my daughter. The drive to the diner gave me time to think about strategy. Rachel had won the first round by controlling the narrative while I was unable to defend myself. But now, I was back, and I had evidence of her deception. The key was to use that evidence strategically, to turn her own tactics against her. Danny was already at the diner when I arrived, sitting in a back booth and looking uncomfortable. He'd always been the nervous type, even as a kid. At 35, he still looked like he was waiting for someone to tell him he was in trouble. "Paul," he said as I sat down, "you look like hell." "Threats. Thanks. That's exactly what every man wants to hear." Disregard. The waitress came over and I ordered coffee and a burger. I hadn't eaten a real meal since Mexico, and I was starting to feel it. "So," Danny said, "what's this all about?" I pulled out some of the documents I'd found and spread them on the table. "This is about my wife systematically destroying my life while I was trapped in a foreign country." I walked him through the whole story: the sedated drinks, the fake videos, the hired actor, the coordinated character assassination. Danny's eyes got wider as I showed him the evidence. "Holy crap, Paul. This is like something out of a movie." "Well, I'm living it. The question is, do you believe me?" Danny studied the documents for a long moment. "I want to believe you. But Paul, the stuff people are saying, it's pretty specific. And Rachel seemed so upset when she was at the bar." Relinquit. "Of course she seemed upset. She's a lawyer. Acting is part of the job. Danny, you've known me since we were kids. Have I ever lied to you about anything important?" Restless. "No, but..." Have I ever been violent or threatening? No. Have I ever had a drinking problem? No, but people change, Paul. Stress can make people do crazy things. I leaned back in the booth, frustrated. Even with evidence, even with 20 years of history, Rachel's lies were still more believable than the truth. Okay, I said. Let me ask you this. What exactly did Rachel say when she came to the bar? Danny shifted uncomfortably. She said you'd been acting strange for months. Drinking more, staying out late, making comments about how she didn't appreciate you. She said you'd been talking about teaching her a lesson. And you believed that? She had photos, Paul. Pictures of you drinking at various places around town. And she played a voicemail you'd left her, where you sounded pretty drunk and angry. Another fake voicemail. Rachel's deception was even more thorough than I'd realized. Danny, I need you to do something for me. I need you to start asking questions around the bar. Find out exactly what people are saying, who's spreading the stories, when they started. Can you do that? I don't know, Paul. If people find out I'm helping you, Stricted, you're not helping me, you're just listening. That's what bartenders do, right? Listen to people talk? Danny considered this. I guess I could pay more attention to what people are saying. That's all I'm asking. And Danny, thanks for hearing me out. It means more than you know. Reimburse. I paid for lunch and drove back to Haven Mills, feeling slightly more optimistic. I had one ally, sort of. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The house felt even emptier when I returned. I spent the afternoon going through old photo albums, looking for pictures of Rachel and me together. She'd taken most of them, but I found a few she'd missed. In every photo, she was smiling that perfect lawyer smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. How had I missed it? How had I lived with this woman for 16 years without seeing what she really was? My new phone rang around 5 p.m. Jake's number appeared on the screen. That was fast, I said. I've got good news and bad news, Jake said. The good news is that your wife isn't as smart as she thinks she is. The bad news is that she's been planning this longer than you thought. Then, how long? Relinquith. At least a year, maybe more. She's been building a relationship with Chad Morrison since his divorce was finalized. They've been meeting at a hotel in Albany every Tuesday for the past 8 months. She opened a secret bank account 6 months ago and has been funneling money into it. And get this, she's already put in an offer on a house in Morrison's neighborhood. Mailbox. What about the actor? Relinquith. Derek Silva. I found him, and he's willing to talk. Turns out Rachel didn't pay him as much as she promised, and he's pissed about it. He'll testify that she hired him to impersonate you, and he still has the clothes she bought him to make the disguise more convincing. Can you get him to sign a statement? Already done. I'll email it to you tonight. Paul, this is enough to destroy her in court. Any judge who sees this evidence will throw out her divorce petition and probably refer her to the Bar Association for ethics violations. I'm not interested in court. Not interested in court, Jake. That'll take years and cost money I don't have. I want something faster. Relinquix. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to give Rachel a taste of her own medicine. Relinquith. The Rusty Anchor on a Friday night was like a wildlife preserve for the working class of Haven Mills. Auto mechanics, construction workers, factory employees, and small business owners gathered to drink cheap beer, argue about sports, and share the kind of gossip that kept small towns running. It was also the perfect place to start a rumor. I walked in around 8 p.m., knowing that most of my former friends would be there. The conversations died as I entered, replaced by uncomfortable silence and sideways glances. I could feel the weight of their judgment, the assumption that I was the unstable drunk Rachel had painted me as. Danny was behind the bar, polishing glasses with nervous energy. He gave me a subtle nod, our agreed-upon signal that he'd been gathering information as promised. I ordered a Coke and found an empty stool at the end of the bar, close enough to hear conversations but far enough away to avoid direct confrontation. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. That's him, someone said. That's the guy who went crazy and abandoned his family. I heard he threatened Mike Murphy's wife, another voice added. Sent her nasty messages after he got fired. Poor Rachel. She seems like such a nice woman. Imagine being married to someone like that. I sipped my Coke and listened, cataloging every lie, every distortion, every piece of Rachel's carefully constructed narrative. She'd been thorough. There wasn't a single person in the bar who hadn't heard some version of my supposed breakdown. Tommy Brennan was holding court at a table near the back, surrounded by guys from the auto shop. He was telling them about the threatening messages I'd supposedly sent, embellishing the story with each retelling. According to Tommy's version, I'd not only threatened Mike's wife, but had also made vague references to making everyone pay for my problems. It was a masterful performance, and Tommy seemed to be enjoying his role as the voice of moral authority. He'd always been jealous of my friendship with Mike, always felt like he deserved more recognition at the shop. Rachel had given him the perfect opportunity to position himself as the responsible, trustworthy employee, while painting me as the dangerous, loose cannon. But Tommy had made one mistake. He was enjoying the attention too much, adding details that weren't in Rachel's original script, details that could be fact-checked. I waited until he mentioned the specific time and date of one of my supposed threatening phone calls, a call that had allegedly been made while I was washing dishes in a Mexican hotel kitchen. Then I pulled out my phone and made a call of my own. "Jake, it's Paul. I need you to do something for me tonight. I need proof of exactly where I was and what I was doing on Tuesday, March 15th, between 2 and 4 p.m. "That's oddly specific," Jake said. "Tommy Brennan just told a room full of people that I called Mike Murphy's wife at 3:30 p.m. that day and threatened her. If I can prove I was in Mexico at that time, it destroys his credibility and raises questions about the rest of Rachel's story. I'll make some calls. The hotel where you worked should have security footage and employment records. Give me an hour." I hung up and continued listening to Tommy's performance. He was really getting into it now, describing my alleged behavior in vivid detail. According to him, I'd been spiraling for months, showing up to work drunk, making inappropriate comments about women, and generally acting like a man on the edge of violence. It was a compelling story, and the audience was eating it up. But Tommy was about to learn an important lesson about the dangers of embellishment. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Got it. Hotel security footage shows you working in the kitchen from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. on March 15th. Employment records confirm. Also have sworn statement from kitchen manager. Tommy's lying through his teeth." Perfect. I stood up and walked over to Tommy's table. The conversation stopped as I approached, and I could feel the tension in the room ratchet up several notches. "Tommy," I said, keeping my voice calm and friendly, "I couldn't help but overhear your story about the threatening phone call I made on March 15th. Tommy's face flushed, but he held his ground. "What about it?" "Well, I was just wondering if you could be more specific about the time. You said 3:30 p.m., right?" "That's right. I was there when Mike got the call from his wife. She was crying, said you just threatened to burn down their house." Elaborate. So elaborate that for a moment, I said that it was really lying that. Just commitment that the lie was lying that's specific. That for a moment, I almost admired Tommy's creativity. Almost. "That's interesting," I said, pulling out my phone, "because I have security footage from a hotel in Puerto Vallarta showing me washing dishes at exactly 3:30 p.m. on March 15th. That would be 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, which means your story is impossible." I played the video Jake had sent me, grainy black and white footage, showing me clearly visible in a hotel kitchen. Date and timestamp clearly visible. The room went silent as everyone watched. "Either you're lying, Tommy, or I've learned to be in two places at once. Which do you think it is?" Face went from red to pale in about 3 seconds. Maybe I got the date wrong. "Or maybe you're full of crap," I said, still keeping my voice calm. "Maybe you've been spreading lies about me because you thought I wasn't here to defend myself." I turned to address the room. "How many of you have heard stories about things I supposedly did while I was in Mexico? How many of those stories came from people who were supposedly there to witness them?" Silence was deafening. I could see people looking at each other, suddenly uncertain about the stories they'd been telling and retelling. "Here's what really happened," I continued. "My wife sedated me at the airport and left me stranded in Mexico with no money and no passport. While I was trapped there, working in a hotel kitchen to earn bus fare to the embassy, she was back here spreading lies about me. She hired an actor to impersonate me in fake videos. She forged threatening messages. She systematically destroyed my reputation while I was unable to defend myself. I pulled out the printed emails I'd found in Rachel's office. I have proof of all of this. Emails between my wife and her boyfriend, discussing strategy for neutralizing my credibility. Contracts with the actor she hired. Payment records for fake evidence. Kimberly. The mood in the room was shifting. I could see doubt creeping into people's faces, the beginning of understanding that they'd been manipulated. The question is, I said, looking directly at Tommy, how many of you were willing accomplices in destroying an innocent man's life? And how many of you were just useful idiots? Tommy stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You can't prove any of that. Those documents could be fake. Could be fake. Just like your story about the threatening phone call is definitely fake. The difference is, I can prove my documents are real. Can you prove yours are? Looked around the room, suddenly realizing that his audience was no longer on his side. The doubt had spread like wildfire, and people were starting to whisper among themselves. You're crazy, Tommy said, but his voice lacked conviction. Rachel warned us you'd try to turn this around, make yourself look like the sufferer. Did she? And when exactly did Rachel warn you about that, Tommy? Before or after she offered to put in a good word for you with Mike about getting my job permanently? Was a guess, but Tommy's expression told me I'd hit the mark. Rachel had been recruiting allies, offering incentives for people to spread her lies. That's not... I never, Tommy stammered. You never what? Never agreed to help destroy my reputation in exchange for career advancement? Never took money from my wife to spread lies about me? Another guess, but Tommy's face told the whole story. The room erupted in angry murmurs, as people realized they'd been manipulated by a coordinated campaign of lies. You son of a witch, said Mike Kowalski, one of the older mechanics. You sold out your best friend for a promotion? Thompson was trapped, surrounded by former allies who were now seeing him as the real villain in the story. He looked around desperately, then made a run for the door. I didn't try to stop him. He'd served his purpose. The room was buzzing with angry conversation now. People were comparing stories, realizing how they'd been manipulated, understanding that they'd been used as weapons in Rachel's war against me. Danny caught my eye from behind the bar and nodded toward the back room. I followed him, leaving the crowd to process what they'd just learned. Jesus Christ, Paul, Danny said once we were alone. You just blew up the entire narrative in about 10 minutes. That was the easy part, I said. Tommy was greedy and stupid. Rachel and Chad are going to be harder to handle. What's your next move? I'm going to give them a taste of their own medicine. They used public humiliation as a weapon against me. Time to return the favor. I spent the next hour at the bar, talking to people individually, showing them the evidence I'd compiled, explaining exactly how they'd been manipulated. By the time I left, the story was already changing. Instead of Paul Mackenzie, the unstable drunk, I was becoming Paul Mackenzie, the wronged husband, the sufferer of an elaborate conspiracy. But I wasn't interested in being a sufferer. I was interested in being the guy who fought back. The next morning, I drove to Morrison Development's offices in downtown Haven Mills. It was a gleaming glass building that stood out like a sore thumb among the old brick storefronts and converted warehouses that made up most of the downtown area. Chad Morrison was clearly a man who liked to make an impression. The receptionist was a young woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Her smile was professionally bright and completely empty. I'd like to see Mr. Morrison, I said. My name is Paul Mackenzie, Romney. Her smile flickered slightly. Do you have an appointment? No, but I think he'll want to see me. Tell him I'm Rachel Mackenzie's husband. She made a phone call, speaking in hushed tones. After a moment, she hung up and directed me to a conference room on the 3rd floor. Chad Morrison was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, handsome in an artificial way, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I used to make in a month. He was trying to project confidence, but I could see the nervousness in his eyes. Mr. Mackenzie, he said, extending a hand. I've heard a lot about you. Allergies. I'll bet you have, I said, ignoring the handshake. Most of it from my wife, I assume. Look, I know this is awkward, but... Oscar? Awkward? I interrupted. That's an interesting word choice. I would have gone with criminal conspiracy, but awkward works too. Unwilling. Chad's composure slipped slightly. I'm not sure what you mean. I pulled out the printed emails and spread them on the conference table. These are communications between you and Rachel, discussing strategy for destroying my reputation. This one here, dated 6 months ago, talks about neutralizing Paul's credibility before he becomes a problem. This one discusses hiring someone to create fake evidence of my instability. Chad glanced at the documents, and I saw recognition in his eyes. These were real, and he knew it. I don't know what you think those prove, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. They prove that you and Rachel conspired to destroy my life while I was trapped in a foreign country. They prove that you're not just an adulterer, you're an active participant in a campaign of defamation and fraud. You can't prove those emails are real. Actually, I can. My investigator has already traced them back to their original servers. We have metadata, IP addresses, the whole digital paper trail. But here's the thing, Chad. I'm not interested in taking this to court. What do you want? I want you to understand what you've gotten yourself into. Rachel isn't just leaving her husband for a richer man. She's a sociopath who systematically destroyed a 20-year marriage for financial gain. If she'll do it to me, what makes you think she won't do it to you? Chad was quiet for a long moment, processing what I'd said. Rachel told me you were unstable. She said you'd been threatening her. And you believed her without question? Did you ever ask to see proof of these threats? Did you ever wonder why a woman who was supposedly afraid of her husband would stay married to him for 16 years? She showed me photos of bruises. Mean. Fake. Just like everything else. Chad, you're being played by a professional. Rachel makes her living destroying marriages and taking half of everything. Did you really think you were special? I could see the doubt creeping into his expression. Rachel had been so convincing, so thorough in her deception, that even her accomplice was starting to question what he'd been told. Look, I said, I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to give you some free advice. Be very careful about trusting Rachel Mackenzie. She's already proven she's willing to destroy one husband to get what she wants. What happens when she gets bored with you? I gathered up the documents and headed for the door. Oh, and Chad, you might want to have a conversation with Rachel about those emails. Ask her why she kept copies of evidence that could destroy both of you. Ask her what else she's been keeping secret. I left him sitting in the conference room, staring at the space where the emails had been. Seeds of doubt, planted in fertile ground. The final stop was Rachel's law office. I knew she wouldn't see me, but I wasn't there to talk to her. I was there to talk to her boss, senior partner Margaret Walsh. Walsh was a woman in her 60s who'd built one of the most successful law practices in the region through a combination of intelligence, ruthlessness, and an absolute intolerance for anything that might damage her firm's reputation. Mr. Mackenzie, she said when her secretary showed me into her office. I was wondering when you'd show up. Were you? That's interesting. What exactly were you expecting? Rachel told us you might try to cause trouble. She said you'd been making threats. I pulled out my phone and played the hotel security footage. This is me in Mexico at the time I was supposedly making those threats. Either Rachel lied to you, or I've developed the ability to teleport. Walsh watched the video with the sharp attention of someone who'd spent decades evaluating evidence. When it finished, she looked up at me with new interest. That's very compelling, Mr. Mackenzie. What else do you have? I spent the next 30 minutes walking her through the evidence. The fake videos, the hired actor, the coordinated campaign of lies. Walsh listened without interrupting, occasionally asking pointed questions that showed she understood exactly what she was looking at. This is quite serious, she said finally. If these allegations are true, Rachel has violated multiple ethical rules and possibly several laws. They're true. The question is what you're going to do about it. I'm going to conduct a thorough investigation. If the evidence supports your claims, Rachel will be terminated and reported to the State Bar Association. When? Imminent. She's already on thin ice for other reasons. This would be the final straw. I left Walsh's office feeling satisfied. Rachel's professional destruction was now inevitable, just as mine had been when she'd started spreading her lies. But I wasn't done yet. The final act of my revenge required a more public stage. The Haven Mills Community Center hosted a charity auction every year to raise money for the local food bank. It was one of those events that drew everyone who was anyone in town. Business owners, lawyers, doctors, politicians, and their spouses. Rachel never missed it, and according to her social media posts, she was planning to attend this year with Chad as her date. It was the perfect venue for the final act of my revenge. I spent the week before the auction carefully preparing. Jake had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Rachel and Chad's relationship, complete with hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and photographs of them together, dating back almost a year. The evidence painted a clear picture of a long-term affair that had been carefully hidden from me. More importantly, Jake had tracked down Derek Silva, the actor Rachel had hired to impersonate me. Derek was more than willing to cooperate. Apparently, Rachel had stiffed him on half his fee, and he was eager for payback. He'd agreed to attend the auction and publicly confess his role in the deception. The auction was held on a Saturday evening in the community center's main hall. I arrived early, dressed in my best suit, the one I'd worn to my wedding 16 years ago. It still fit, though it felt strange after months of wearing work clothes and the cheap stuff I'd bought in Mexico. Rachel and Chad made their entrance around 7 p.m., fashionably late and clearly enjoying the attention. Rachel was wearing a new dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and Chad was working the room like a politician, shaking hands and making small talk with potential business contacts. They looked like the perfect couple, successful, attractive, confident. No one looking at them would suspect they were built on a foundation of lies and betrayal. I waited until the formal auction began and the crowd was seated. Then I made my move. The auctioneer had just finished selling a weekend getaway package when I stood up and asked for the microphone. "Excuse me," I said, projecting my voice to carry across the room. "I'd like to make a special announcement." Auctioneer looked confused but handed me the microphone. The crowd turned to look at me, and I could see Rachel's face go pale as she realized what was happening. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Paul Mackenzie. Some of you may have heard stories about me recently. Stories about how I abandoned my family and had some kind of breakdown in Mexico. The room was completely silent now. I could see people leaning forward, sensing drama. I'm here tonight to tell you the truth about what really happened, and to introduce you to someone who can corroborate my story. I gestured to Derek Silva, who stood up from his seat near the back of the room. He was wearing clothes identical to what I'd worn in the fake videos. Rachel's costume department had been thorough. "This is Derek Silva," I continued. "He's an actor who was hired by my wife to impersonate me in fake videos while I was stranded in Mexico. Derek, would you like to tell everyone about your role in this deception?" Derek walked to the front of the room, clearly enjoying his moment in the spotlight. "I was hired by Rachel Mackenzie to create fake evidence of her husband's erratic behavior. She provided me with clothes, coached me on his mannerisms, and filmed me acting drunk and aggressive in various locations around town." The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. I could see Rachel trying to leave, but Chad was frozen in his seat, apparently unable to process what he was hearing. "The videos were part of a larger campaign to destroy my reputation, while I was unable to defend myself," I continued. "My wife sedated me at the airport and left me stranded in Mexico with no money and no passport. While I was trapped there, she was back here spreading lies about me, turning my friends against me, and getting me fired from my job." I pulled out the printed emails and held them up for the crowd to see. I have documentation of the entire conspiracy, including communications between my wife and her boyfriend, discussing strategy for neutralizing my credibility. Was in chaos now. People were talking loudly, some standing up to get a better look, others pulling out their phones to record what was happening. Rachel had finally managed to stand up and was pushing her way toward the exit. "Rachel," I called out, my voice carrying over the noise. "Don't leave yet. We're just getting to the good part." She stopped and turned to face me, her expression a mixture of rage and fear. "You're insane," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is exactly the kind of unstable behavior I was talking about." "Manslaughter?" I laughed. "That's rich. coming from someone who hired actors and forged evidence to frame her own husband. Tell me, Rachel, which one of us is really unstable here? Chad finally found his voice. This is ridiculous. Rachel would never— Never what? I interrupted. Never systematically destroy someone's life for financial gain? Chad, you might want to ask yourself why Rachel kept copies of all the incriminating emails. What do you think she's planning to do with evidence of your involvement in this conspiracy? I could see the doubt creeping into Chad's expression. The seeds I'd planted during our meeting were starting to sprout. Here's what I think happened, I continued, addressing the crowd but keeping my eyes on Rachel. My wife got tired of being married to a blue-collar worker. She found herself a wealthy boyfriend and decided to upgrade her life. The only problem was me. I might be entitled to half of her assets in a divorce. So she decided to destroy my credibility first, making me look like an unstable drunk who'd abandoned his family. The crowd was hanging on every word now. This was better than any soap opera, and it was happening right in front of them. She hired an actor to create fake evidence. She spread lies about my behavior to anyone who would listen. She even convinced my own daughter that I was dangerous. All while I was trapped in a foreign country, working in a hotel kitchen to earn enough money to get home. Rachel was shaking with rage now. You have no proof of any of this. Silenced. Actually, I do. I held up the stack of documents. Emails between you and Chad discussing the conspiracy. Payment records for the actor. Hotel receipts showing your affair started almost a year ago. Bank records showing you've been hiding money in secret accounts. Should I go on? The crowd turned to look at Rachel, waiting for her response. She looked around the room, seeing nothing but hostile faces and judgmental stares. This is maltreatment, she said finally. I'm calling the police. Silenced. Good idea, I said. I'm sure they'd be very interested in seeing evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and defamation. Oh, and Rachel, you might want to call your boss too. I had a very interesting conversation with Margaret Walsh this week. Lorska's face went white. She knew her career was over. Chad stood up, finally understanding that he'd been played. Rachel, is this true? Did you really hire someone to frame your husband? Chad, don't listen to him. He's trying to turn you against me. Like you turned everyone against me? I said. The difference is, I have proof. The auctioneer was trying to restore order, but the crowd was too invested in the drama to pay attention to charity fundraising. This was the kind of scandal that would be talked about in Haven Mills for years. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, raising my voice to address the entire room. I want you all to remember this moment. Remember how easy it was for one person to turn an entire community against an innocent man. Remember how quickly you believed lies without asking for proof. And remember what happens when someone finally fights back. I handed the microphone back to the auctioneer and walked toward the exit. As I passed Rachel's table, I stopped and looked down at her. Oh, and Rachel? Enjoy explaining all this to Mia. I'm sure she'll be very interested to learn how her mother destroyed her father's life for money. Rachel lunged at me, her composure finally cracking completely. You fool! You've ruined everything. No, I said, catching her wrists as she tried to claw at my face. You ruined everything. I just made sure everyone knew about it. Security guards were moving toward us now, but I released Rachel's wrists and stepped back. I'm leaving, I announced, but I want everyone here to remember what they've seen tonight. This is what happens when someone tries to destroy an innocent person. This is what justice looks like. I walked out of the community center to the sound of chaos behind me. The auction was over, but the real show was just beginning. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Haven Mills would know the truth about Rachel Mackenzie and her elaborate deception. My phone rang as I reached my truck. Mia's name appeared on the screen. Dad? Her voice was small, uncertain. Hi, sweetheart. I saw the video. Someone posted it online already. Dad, is it true? Did Mom really do all those things? Yes, Mia. It's true. She was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry. I should have believed you. You believed what you were told by someone you trusted. That's not your fault. Can I come home? I don't want to stay with Mom anymore. Of course you can come home. This is your house too. Dad, I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. I hung up and sat in my truck for a moment, watching people stream out of the community center. Some were talking excitedly on their phones, already spreading the story. Others looked shocked, still processing what they'd witnessed. Rachel's BMW was still in the parking lot, but I could see her sitting in the passenger seat while Chad drove. Their relationship probably wouldn't survive the night. Chad now knew he'd been used as a pawn in Rachel's game, and men like him didn't handle humiliation well. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Saw the video online. Holy crap, Paul. You just became a legend. Another text, this one from Danny at the Rusty Anchor. Bars packed. Everyone's talking about what you did. You're buying drinks for the house when you get here. More texts kept coming. Friends, co-workers, even people I barely knew, all expressing support and admiration for what I'd done. The narrative had completely flipped. Instead of Paul Mackenzie, the unstable drunk, I was now Paul Mackenzie, the wronged husband who'd fought back against impossible odds. But the best text came from an unknown number. Mr. Mackenzie, this is Mike Murphy. I saw what happened tonight. If you want your job back, it's waiting for you. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. I started the truck and drove home, feeling lighter than I had in months. Rachel had tried to destroy my life, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated how much fight I had left in me. The house was dark when I arrived, but it didn't feel empty anymore. Tomorrow, Mia would be coming home. My job was waiting for me. My friends were calling to apologize and offer support. My reputation was not only restored, but enhanced. I was now the guy who'd stood up to a corrupt system and won. Rachel, on the other hand, was facing professional ruin, social ostracism, and the collapse of her carefully constructed new life. Her law career was over. Her relationship with Chad was probably finished. Even her relationship with Mia was damaged, perhaps irreparably. She'd tried to destroy me and ended up destroying herself instead. It was poetic justice of the highest order. I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey I kept for special occasions and raised it in a toast to the empty house. To Rachel Mackenzie, I said aloud, the woman who taught me that sometimes the best revenge is simply telling the truth. I drank the whiskey and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in months. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, justice had been served. Rachel had left me in Mexico, but I'd brought hell back home. And hell, as it turned out, was just the truth, delivered at exactly the right moment to exactly the right audience. She'd played a perfect game, right up until the moment she lost everything.